The Kitemaker. There was only one tree in the street known as Gully Ramnath, an ancient banyan that had grown through the cracks of an abandoned mosque, and little Ali's kite had caught in its branches. The boy, barefoot and clad only in a torn shirt, ran along the cobbled stones of the narrow street to where his grandfather sat, nodding dreamily in the sunshine of their back courtyard. "Grandfather," shouted the boy, "my kite has gone." The old man woke from his daydream with a start, and raising his head, displayed a beard that would have been white had it not been dyed red with mehendi leaves. "Did the twine break?" he asked. I know that kite twine is not what it used to be. I know that kite twine is not what it used to be. "No, grandfather, the kite is stuck in the banyan tree." The old man chuckled. "You have yet to learn how to fly a kite properly, my child, and I am too old to teach you. That's the pity of it. But you shall have another." He had just finished making a new kite from bamboo, paper, and thin silk, and it lay in the sun, firming up. "I will not lose this one," he said. "This kite will fly like a bird." He turned on his heels and skipped out of the courtyard. The old man remembered a time when men flew kites and great battles were fought, the kites swerving and swooping in the sky, tangling with each other until the string of one was cut. Then the defeated but liberated kite would float away into the blue unknown. Kite flying was then the sport of kings, and the old man remembered how the Nawab himself would come down to the riverside with his retinue to participate in this noble pastime. There was time then to spend an idle hour with a gay, dancing strip of paper. Now everyone hurried in a heat of hope, and delicate things like kite and daydreams were trampled underfoot. He, Mahmud the Kitemaker, had in the prime of his life been well known throughout the city. Some of his more elaborate kites once sold for as much as 3 or 4 rupees each. At the request of the Nawab, he had once made a very special kind of kite, unlike any that had been seen in the district. It consisted of a series of small, very light paper discs, trailing on a thin bamboo frame. To the end of each disc he fixed a spring of grass, forming a balance on both sides. Every one had heard of the dragon kite that Mahmud had built, and word went around that it possessed supernatural powers. A large crowd assembled in the open to watch its first public launching in the presence of the Nawab. It pulled fiercely on the twine, and Mahmud's young sons had to help him with the reel. But still the kite pulled, determined to be free, to break loose, to live a life of its own. And eventually it did so. He did not make another like it, and instead he presented to the Nawab a musical kite, one that made a sound like a violin when it rose in the air. Those were more leisurely, more spacious days. But the Nawab had died years ago, and his descendants were almost as poor as Mahmud himself. Kite makers, like poets, once had their patrons, but today no one knew Mahmud, simply because there were too many people in the gully and they could not be bothered with their neighbors. But there was the boy, his grandson. It was good that Mahmud's son worked close by, for it gladdened the old man's heart to watch the small boy at play in the winter sunshine, growing under his eyes like a young and well-nourished sapling, putting forth new leaves each day. There is a great affinity between trees and men. We grow at much the same pace, if we are not hurt or starved or cut down. In our youth, we are resplendent creatures, and in our declining years, we stoop a little. We remember, we stretch our brittle limbs in the sun, and then, with a sigh, we shed our last leaves. The voices in the street grew fainter, and Mahmud wondered if he was going to fall asleep and dream, as he so often did, of a kite so beautiful and powerful that it would resemble the great white bird of the Hindus, Garuda, God Vishnu's famous steed. He would like to make a wonderful new kite for little Ali. He had nothing else to leave the boy. He heard Ali's voice in the distance, but did not realize that he was calling him. The voice seemed to come from very far away. Ali was at the courtyard door, asking if his mother had as yet returned from the bazaar. When Mahmud did not answer, the boy came forward repeating his question. The sunlight was slanting across the old man's head, and a small white butterfly rested on his flowing bird. Mahmud was silent, and when Ali put his small brown hand on the old man's shoulder, he met with no response. The boy heard a faint sound, like the rumbling of marbles in his pocket. Suddenly afraid, Ali turned and moved to the door, and then ran down the street shouting for his mother. The butterfly left the old man's beard and flew to the mimosa tree, and a sudden gust of wind caught the torn kite and lifted it into the air, carrying it far above the struggling city into the blind blue sky.